So welcome everybody back to Todd's podcast. I want to welcome our guest today. He is Lieutenant Colonel Charles Buck MacLaughlin, and he will be joining us. We're going to be talking a little bit about what he does these days, his service to our country as a United States Air Force pilot, and also talking about his relationship and what he continues to do with the Avon Park Air Force Range. So Buck MacLaughlin is currently the Range Operations Officer for the 598th Range Squadron, 23rd Wing, the Avon Park Air Force Range. For those of us that are locals, we used to call it the bombing range. And for almost 21 years, Mr. MacLaughlin served as a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force, retiring in 2012 as a lieutenant colonel. He received his commission from the United States Air Force Academy in 1991 and has served our country in the Air Force in many different capacities. He is a veteran of Operation Southern Watch, a graduate of the United States Air Force Weapons School, where he also served as an instructor. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from the United States Air Force Academy in 1991, a master's degree in aerospace and technology from Embry-Riddle in 2003. He also got a second master's degree in military operations, arts and sciences from Air Command and Staff College from Air University in 2006. You're starting to get close to Dr. Randy Avon, who had a resume that was 5 pages long just with his degrees. I think he would just go get a degree during Easter break sometimes. Buck has a rating of command pilot with more than 2,600 flight hours in several different trainer planes, the A-10 Warthog, and also the F-117 Nighthawk stealth bomber. His chest is replete with a number of medals of meritorious service, aerial achievement, and Air Force commendation medals, all with multiple oak leaf clusters. How was that? Was that fairly accurate, Buck?
That was perfect.
Okay, good.
And Todd, let me tell you, thank you very much. I'm really honored to be on this podcast, particularly looking at the guests that you've had prior to this. So to be on that list is a real honor. So
well, I appreciate it. You were highly sought after, and I had been wanting to have you on to talk about yourself and the Avon Park Range, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But I want to talk a little bit about you first, and then we'll get into the meat of it. You told me just a few minutes ago you were born in Colorado, and you're still acclimating to Florida summers. Where in Colorado were you born?
I was born and raised in Gunnison, Colorado.
Okay.
It's a small mountain town just on the western slope of the Rocky Mountains, and I don't think I'm ever going to acclimatize to Florida summers compared to Colorado summers.
Did you grow up a ski bum?
I did, yeah. Not as much as some of my friends, but regularly skied during the winters, and yeah, I really enjoyed growing up and living in Colorado.
So what drove you to wanting to fly fighter aircraft?
It really started as at a young age, before I can even remember. My parents, and I still have it somewhere in the boxes of books, I've got an airplane book, and it was something that my grandparents put together, literally just cutting out clippings from magazine articles and things that had pictures of airplanes. And my mom, I can really credit too. Gunnison's, like I said, a small mountain town.
Right.
We have a small regional airport there, and twice a day, I think there's an old DC-9, DC-10, something like that, old prop commuter airplane would fly into town, and twice a day my mom would put me in our little VW Bug with the sunroof open, and we would drive to the airport, park at the end of the runway, watch the airplane come in, land over top of us. We'd drive up to where the passengers disembarked, and no gates or anything. This is just the ladder right on the tarmac, so we could see the engine spinning and watch the strangers get on and off the airplane. And then we'd rush down to the other end of the runway and be ready for it to take off. And,
wow.
And we did that twice a day because apparently I just loved it. So always wanted to fly airplanes from a little child.
Any brothers and sisters that had that passion that wanted to go with you? Or
No, I'm the oldest of four,
Okay.
and the only one that pursued the Air Force and ended up being a pilot.
So it wasn't from watching Top Gun, wanting to be Tom Cruise's double. Of course, you're a foot taller than Tom Cruise at least.
Right.
Or air shows. Did you ever go to air shows? Did your mom ever take you to air shows when you were younger?
Not so much air shows because, again, we're in a small town. We may have made it over to one or two, but I do remember on family trips, anytime we'd pass a military installation, my face was plastered up against the window of our station wagon just to see the aircraft on the ramp. It's funny you mentioned Top Gun because I do have to admit that that played a role in it. That movie came out, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was the junior year in high school for me, the summer of junior year. And we, as a family, had just taken a trip down to the Gulf of California, Baja, Mexico, for spring break. And on the way down there, we stopped through Arizona State and University of Arizona colleges or schools. And at the time, I was on the swim team growing up and had some pretty competitive times.
What did you swim?
I was primarily a sprinter, 50 and 100 freestyle, 100 butterfly.
Have you had a chance to meet Rowdy Gaines?
Have I met Rowdy Gaines? No, I don't think so. But I paused because I pursued swimming at the academy and was able to qualify for NCAA championships and swim with some of the. I say swim with. I was in the same pool as
you were
some
like
of the
7 and 8,
Olympic
not
champions.
3 and 4 and 5.
Right, exactly.
Well, we had Rowdy on the podcast. He was one of our first couple of guests. Rowdy and I and General Plumbo came later, but Rowdy and I were little kid best friends.
Oh, really?
And spend the night with each other, and he was always trying to find what sport he worked out well in, and he took to swimming, and he's never looked back. And it's really kind of fun to watch him announcing the Olympics and listen to some of that. But he was a fantastic guest, very generous with his time. So
that's fantastic.
Maybe
I didn't
can
know
get
that.
over to the range one day with General Plumbo and.
Please. That'd be a great opportunity.
He's the nicest guy you've ever met.
We would love to have him out to the range. That'd be great. Yeah, but just to close that story, I thought I was going Arizona State, something like that. I had interest in the academy, but particularly after I saw the picture of the girls' swim team, I'm like, I need to go to school here.
Yeah.
And then that summer, Top Gun came out, and I remembered that desire to fly from a kid and pursued and was fortunate enough to get into the Air Force Academy. After that. But that movie really did kind of turn me around. I have to admit, as cheesy as that sounds.
I think it was one of the greatest recruiting movies ever for at least the Air Force and anyone who wanted to fly.
I think.
Did you always want to be a fast jet, single-seater guy, or did you just want to be in the air no matter what they put you in? Because you always flew, fighters and the trainers and is that something you always aspire that you want to be the only one in the cockpit?
In fairness, actually, I just wanted to fly airplanes.
Okay.
I would have been happy with flying cargo aircraft or some of the heavier aircraft, the crew-served aircraft, I think. But in my view, the ultimate test of flying is being that solo pilot, and in the Air Force or in the Department of Defense across the board. In my view, it is the fighter aircraft, and I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. At the time that I graduated pilot training, I frankly was kind of right in the middle of my class. I was not the top graduate, and typically only the top graduates get the opportunity to pursue fighter aircraft. But at the time that I went through, it was the end of the President Reagan years, and the military budget was kind of decreasing quite a bit. So I ended up being what was called a banked pilot. And it was the banked pilot program, and it meant that I graduated from pilot training. I had my wings, but I was sent to a non-flying assignment for my first assignment. And so I was an accounting and finance officer for 2.5 years at Misawa Air Base in Japan. non-flying. And then they brought me back and I got to requalify. But through that process, through that bank pilot program, they allowed us to select what type of aircraft, not the specific aircraft, but what general type that you would come back to. And I figured, what the heck, even though I wasn't at the top of my class, wanted an opportunity to try to fly fighters. And so I selected the banked fighter category. And that's what led to the opportunities that I've had.
So one of the planes you flew was the F-117. That was the stealth. Was that the first iteration of the stealth bomber? I mean, it's not the big V-wing that we see today. It was kind of the attack fighter bomber. I'm now showing my ignorance. So
no,
is that what you started off in, and then you went to the A-10s, or you started in the A-10s and then do the F-117s?
Yeah, actually started out in the A-10s.
Okay.
Flew that for about 3.5 years. In fact, took a remote assignment to Korea to get out of an F-117 assignment because I really enjoyed flying the A-10. I think it's an outstanding mission, supporting those brave Americans that are dealing with the enemy on the ground. That close air support mission to me is really where it's at. And the A-10 is just a marvelous airplane. I mean, a flying gun, what's not to like about that? However, the opportunity to get into the Air Force wanted me to go to the F-117 after that remote assignment in Korea in the A-10s, and that opened up doors that I didn't anticipate I would get. So, really kind of neat opportunity, I think, to have flown both aircraft.
What was the hardest? What was harder to fly, the A-10 or the F-117?
Definitely the A-10. Harder to employ, I would say. Flying both of them, they're both relatively friendly aircraft. The A-10, just based on its engineering, its design, is a pretty friendly aircraft to fly. Definitely more challenging to employ. The F-117, ironically, because of all the flight control computers that would make that strange shape actually fly, flew very well also. I doing some research, it seemed like they only produced like 56 or 59 of them, something like that, and they kind of retired it from service because of either the expense or the difficulty or whatever. And I see where they're talking about decommissioning the A-10 or taking them out of service, and to me, the A-10 is just the ultimate badass plane. It really is. It was designed for that close air support role, and yeah, absolutely.
Do you fly now for pleasure? What do you like to fly?
I do. It's part of my current assignment or current job. Actually, we schedule most of the military special use airspace in Central Florida, roughly anywhere south from Orlando all the way down to the Keys. And there's a requirement to do airspace surveys on some of that airspace annually. And so I'll fly a Cessna 182 or that similar aircraft, high wing, single engine aircraft, as part of doing those surveys.
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate. Since 1996, the firm has offered unrivaled brokerage services throughout Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. With over 90 expert advisors throughout the region, our team has the knowledge and resources to help clients realize their most ambitious real estate investment goals. When you choose SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, you have access to a diverse suite of commercial and land services, including forestry consulting, land management, auctions, property management, commercial leasing, and negotiating conservation easements. If you're seeking to invest in land or explore commercial real estate opportunities in the Southeast, contact us today at svnsaunders.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today. Once again, that's svnsaunders.com or by phone at 877-518-5263. 888-518-5263.
So we ran into each other this past Friday at the change of command ceremony down at the Avon Park Range, and there were two A-10s 100 feet behind you in the backdrop. You were the master of ceremonies for the program. Were you just kind of itching just to get the keys and take one for a lap around the park?
I keep saying, just let me do it one more time. I'd be satisfied if I could just get in it one more time. But yeah.
Well, I thought the change of command was a really neat ceremony. I think it was maybe the third one I've seen at Avon Park. I did get to see General Palumbo when they changed him out at Shaw for the Southern Air Command, and General Franks came in and took his spot. Obviously, much bigger ceremony, was much longer. It was 2 and 3 days with a lot more pomp and circumstance. But it was so impressive. One, that we started on time and we ended on time. I don't know if part of it was the storm that was coming in on Friday, because several of the people that flew in, including the colonel, he was trying to get out of there, and as was General Palumbo and others were. But it was such a neat ceremony, and this is one command center, and it happens all over. And I think it's a great way to watch folks in your business and your profession and that serve us to have that opportunity to run it. What does a base commander do that you don't do? What's the delineation of responsibilities?
Well, I'll answer that question starting with my current job as the range operations officer. I am responsible for most of the training and the preparation for the training that goes on at Avon Park Air Force Range. The scheduling of the units that come in falls under me. The target sets, the infrastructure internal to the range that we use and provide for units literally from across the nation, certainly within the state of Florida, to come and train at. So that's my primary job. The commander's job is really to oversee not only that portion of it, but also the support side of the house. Okay. Our environmental side, the operations fall under him. So I report directly to the squadron commander. All the infrastructure, the buildings, the hangar where you're at, the airfield, all that responsibility falls up under that active duty commander. And I think that's really a critical piece, because that commander provides that tie to the active duty Air Force and to the current Air Force. Several of us now, civilian employees, general service employees, have been at the range for a couple decades now. Right. It's surprising how quickly the time goes. And it's easy to lose touch with the rest of the Air Force, if you will, big Air Force. And so having that rotation at that commander brings in a fresh perspective, current operations, that kind of perspective is really important for us. And I would say that's the key distinction. I'm fortunate to be able to help advise the commander and do some of the community engagement activities that a commander does, and I'm glad they trust me with that responsibility. But ultimately, the one wearing the uniform is the one who bears that responsibility.
It seems like, for me looking back, and I have not paid the strictest of attention, but it seems like it's about a 2-year deployment for the range, for the base commander, that runs everything. Is they come in, they do their 2 years, and then they go to other portions of their life, whether continuing on with active duty or retire or whatever. You were base commander. Am I saying it correct? Base commander?
Yeah, in general, yes. Technically, when I was in command of the range, it was a detachment. It was the designation for our unit at the time. And that is significant because that's a level of command that's really kind of just under the squadron level that is really the formal one. But in 2017, we were designated, as you indicated earlier, the 598th Range Squadron.
Okay.
And that's the first formal command position within the Air Force. And that 2-year period is important because for leaders that are seeking promotion or are going to go on to bigger leadership roles within the Air Force, that is kind of their first test of their of command, if you will, and an important step. And as such, they really do keep them to that 2-year time frame because they really it's the next guy up. They have to get the next young commander coming in
and train them and keep them ready.
Right, and it's a formal part of the progression within the Air Force.
And you commanded the base as an active duty,
I
correct?
did. Yep.
Did you do 2 or 4 years?
I was able to stay a little bit longer, partly because we were a detachment and there wasn't quite that pressure.
Was it 08 to 012? Is that when you were here?
Yeah, just about. Yeah, okay. Midway through. Actually, I think it was November of 11 when I did my change of command, and they let me stay a little bit longer. In part because I had come from the F-117 community, and as you indicated earlier, that aircraft retired, or the Air Force retired that aircraft. And so I didn't have an aircraft to get back to. So I became non-current in terms of my Air Force flying role. And it made sense to keep me in the position at the range because at the time that was not a flying position either.
Right.
So theoretically, the Air Force didn't have to have another pilot come in to command the range, go non-current, that they would potentially have to get retrained and requalified. So at that time, it made sense to leave me in position a little bit longer.
And you just retired from active duty. You were one of those that retired from active duty after your stay at Avon Park and running it?
I did,
okay,
yeah.
I thought that's so. I think the first time I ever remember meeting you or seeing you was I happened to be a county commissioner, and you were in the audience presenting some issue that was going on with it, and you were there in your flight suit. And I went, dang, that's pretty impressive that he's coming here, because we've all heard about it but never had any contact with it. And that is the first time I was ever exposed to you and a little bit about what you do. And I think the fact that you've continued on as a civilian through civilian service to the range and also Central Florida Regional Planning Council and your relationships in the community, I think that has helped deliver continuity with the range and also with the local community, be it Sebring, Avon Park, Winter Haven, the whole area.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because honestly, through the Air Force, I'd had opportunities to be mission commanders, and I've briefed at and led missions at Red Flag, which is the Air Force's one of its premier training exercises held out at Nellis Air Force Base. So I was comfortable talking to a room of 200 pilots and air crew and all that. And I tell you, my first couple times in front of a Board of County Commission, I was nervous. I was shaking. It was a different environment. And so I'm really thankful that I got those opportunities to work with the community and kind of learn that aspect of the job. That's not something that any of my prior Air Force career had really prepared me for. So appreciate those words that it was good that I was there representing the range. But like I said, I learned a lot from you all as well.
Before I became a county commissioner, I presented a case on a piece of property that our family was involved in, and it scared the crap out of me. I mean, I'm dry mouthed and I got a tie on, and I never done it before. I'd never seen any video of what I was supposed to do. And it was not a complicated case, but it scared me to death. So I obviously got used to it. You obviously got used to it. And you obviously can speak in front of 200, 400 people. So, but when they turn the video camera on, it is a little different environment.
It is.
You tighten a little
That's
bit.
Fair.
So let's talk about the range a little bit and why it's important, what the mission is with it, and what all you do with it, and why is it important to our defense system.
Right. Avon Park Air Force Range is a 106,000-acre Air Force primary training range. And I make note of that designation because our mission is not to do tests. We don't do any developmental tests. We don't test new rockets or missiles or aircraft for example, Eglin Air Force Base and Eglin Range they do developmental tests up on the Panhandle. as a primary training range, we are focused on our warfighters, and we are a place where they come to practice and hone their craft, just like any other professional would. Although arguably, the consequences of poor performance in this job are more significant than a lot of them. And Avon Park is the Air Force's largest training range east of the Mississippi.
Really?
So we have the ground space and the airspace that is necessary to really give these units a degree of freedom to operate and to train like they fight. And that makes us, I think, and I'm obviously biased, but I believe it makes Avon Park a national asset, because the feedback that we get from a lot of the units is that they get to train and do things at Avon Park that they're not allowed to do at any other range in the country. And that realism of practice, that realism of training is what hopefully is going to bring them back home in one piece. And we like to say the more you sweat in peacetime, the less you bleed in combat. And we think we provide that capability to our armed forces in an outstanding manner.
Is part of that the just sheer size of it? So when they're making their approaches to the target, they have a lot of latitude of approaches, angles to be more realistic when they're in their training. Is that what you mean by is that important because of the size as much as anything?
Yeah, no, that is exactly right.
Okay.
We have the amount of airspace and the amount of ground space to act as safety buffer zones for those weapons deliveries that allows units to come in and prosecute attacks from 360-degree attack heading and use a variety of weapons, most of the weapons within the inventory. They can release at Avon Park, but because we can contain that weapons footprint, if you will, the distance that it could fly stays within our range. And that's not the case for every range. There are some ranges in the state of Florida, Pine Castle Range, for example. You have to be on a very prescribed, very strict heading and altitude to release certain weapons to manage that footprint. And we can really take the reins off the units and let them operate freely. And that's not just the aircraft. We can do that with the ground personnel too.
Right.
They can practice laser designation while on the move, because we have enough space, again, to contain that laser footprint, that laser reflection, if you will, make sure that stays on range so it's not harming anyone off range. They can operate their small arms and crew serve weapons and doing convoy training and things like that while keeping the weapons footprints internal to the range. And so it really, again, simulates those conditions that they might find themselves in combat.
I've had the opportunity, I think, twice to be out when y'all have had different planes coming in. You had some A-10s and F-16s. And I don't see how anyone would ever want to make the United States mad just from 3 or 4 aircraft coming in, much less you just unleash everything. As the precision that your aircraft can deliver their weapons, to the speed, it just scares the crap out of you. And I'm on the same team when I was out there. So I appreciate the opportunity to witness that firsthand, and it's certainly something that's awe-inspiring.
Well, I appreciate that. We like to say the last thing we want is a fair fight. And that doesn't mean that we don't prescribe and follow the laws of armed conflict. But yeah, we want to overwhelm the enemy completely, and hopefully to the point where they make the right choice and don't even start something. Let's be a deterrent force. Let's preempt conflict if we have to. But if that fails, let's get in. Let's do the job as quickly, as efficiently, with the minimum loss of life as possible. And that oftentimes is just that, as you kind of indicated, that overwhelming force that our country can provide.
So the sheer size, I mean, and again, growing up here at the Avon Park bombing range, they just drop bombs. But you do so much more training than just Air Force coming in. You got other type of ground operations. You have all sorts of things. So I think it's not just a single use type base. I'm not going to go into any further because I don't want to say something that I don't know that I'm supposed to or not. But people don't understand. Some do. They don't recognize just how important that range is to the operations of our military all around. And we've got to figure out a way to keep it open, keep it functioning, keeping it, delivering what you guys need, what active folks need, and how we can help do that. When did the base, you had mentioned it's 106,000 acres. I think about 40% is in Polk County and the other 60% is Highlands. I could be off a percentage or two. So there is a relationship with Polk and Highlands. They do all seem to cooperate whenever possible. When you have VIP events, there are dignitaries from both counties. Frostproof comes down. I think it's a great example of the cooperation of local government with the federal government and what you do. What other things does the range do? Huge environmental programs that I don't think most people know about. How does the public access that? What science goes on out there that you can talk to us about?
Yeah, great points, and I do want to highlight on what you said about the cooperation with the community. That's critically important for sustaining our mission and engaging. We want to be the best neighbors we can, even though we make a lot of noise and rattle some windows sometimes based on the nature of the training that occurs. And again, it's not just dropping bombs or shooting guns. It's convoy training. It's land navigation, really anything that our armed forces need to do out in the environment, they're able to do at Avon Park. And it's because of that situation. If we take that whole 106,000 acres, really the most intense military aspect of it is limited really just about 20,000 acres, those weapons impact areas. But the rest are safety buffer zones. To account for those weapons footprints, like I talked about, to keep both range staff and the public safe and outside of those potential impact areas. And those, because we don't want development in them and don't want the public most of the time in them, we have those are some of the most pristine natural Florida areas that you can find anywhere. And that seems really counterintuitive when you're talking about a bombing range. I often can almost picture the mental image forming in people's mind when I tell them I work at a bombing range, because they're imagining the weapons impacts and the explosions and the craters, and not those safety buffer areas. And because we are able to apply prescribed fire through our prescribed fire program, which incidentally is the second largest prescribed fire program in the Air Force, but also through the ordnance, it occasionally starts fire, and we often let it burn because that is at a pace and a cadence, if you will, that nature burned this area before mankind came in and put all the impediments to fire. And so that benefits our natural infrastructure, both plant and animal. A lot of people don't realize that the military installations actually have more threatened and endangered species on them than our national park system does. And for Avon Park specifically, we have currently, I believe it is 14 listed species, either threatened or endangered, to include the Florida grasshopper sparrow, which at one point was the most critically endangered bird in all of North America, and is still one of the top ones. But also indigo snake, gopher tortoise, crested caracara, red cockaded woodpecker, Florida scrub jay, and that's just the animal side. I can't list all the different kind of plants, and to include species that are only found here on the Lake Wales Ridge in Central Florida, nowhere else on the planet. And that environmental piece is really critical to the Air Force, because if we don't take care of the land, if we don't meet the Environmental Protection Act requirements as a federal agency, then we lose the ability to use that land.
Right.
So to your point, that's really an important aspect of our our overall range operations and management of that land is to keep it as pristine as possible.
And that story does need to be told, and y'all tell it whenever you're invited, I think. But when you said that there's 20,000 acres of the 106, I think some people think, well, they've got 106,000 acres, they're just carpet bombing everywhere. It's not that. You do have 80-something thousand acres that's preservation, environmental, that you're protecting these species, and I don't think y'all get enough credit, the military gets enough credit for being that good of a steward of the land. And you also allow hunting?
Yeah, that's correct. Through the Sykes Act, we also, really, again, because if you back up, 106,000 acres, that's a good chunk of Central Florida. It really is. And sitting right there in the middle, it is critically important for us from a community engagement perspective that through that Sykes Act, that gives us the authority to open up the range when we're not conducting military operations, or sometimes even while we are, as long as we can keep them safely separated, open that to the public, and primarily in the forms of our outdoor recreation program, the hunting program,
right.
But also a lot of camping, fishing, hiking. At one point, part of the Florida Trail went through a portion of the range, kind of the eastern portion.
Wow.
Yeah, for the hiking trail. Unfortunately,
the Florida Cracker Trail, is that the trail you're talking about, or just another hiking trail?
Well, I think historically the Florida Cracker Trail does go through there,
okay.
And that's another aspect that I don't think people realize. We have she's really, I would describe, a world-class archaeologist on our staff and a historian, and Fort Kissimmee, a lot of the original sediments dating back to the Seminole Indian Wars, and even earlier than that in terms of dugout canoes. The cultural resource aspect is something we manage very carefully as well. And it's part of that overall picture of taking care of the land. But back to the hunting program, that is actually, we write that in, having a hunting program as part of our integrated natural resource management plan, because we invite the public in to help manage species, particularly the feral hog population, which they are indiscriminate on what they're going to dig up. They don't care if it's a rare wiregrass patch or something like that.
Do you ever find them on the runway?
We find them on the runway, yes.
They can't be good for an aircraft trying to land either.
No. And we have an active program called the Bird Aircraft Strike Hazard. That includes feral hogs and includes alligators, some kind of a unique aspect for, I guess, Florida. But we try to make sure, particularly on the airfield, that we keep them separated from the aircraft.
Hey everyone, this is Bob O'Malley, president of Right Track Public Affairs, and I would like to encourage you to listen to Todd's podcast. Each episode features great conversations with new and exciting guests like myself. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to Todd's podcast wherever you get your podcast.
So I think another thing that people don't understand, and maybe they do, but development's coming to Florida. It's been here. It's coming all around. And when different developers want to buy land, not on the property, not on the 106,000 acres, but in the general vicinity, the impact could be significant just to you guys, because it may change flight patterns. It may change approach patterns. It may change whatever your operations are. And it's something that some of us are more cognizant about than others. And when we were having the ability to approve and disapprove different developments, and even if you get people to say, hey, I know the range is right next door and they're running these things, if they put in a development with 400 families, even though those 400 families may have agreed up front that we understand the range is next door, it doesn't mean they're not going to start chirping and barking and complaining. And at some point, that could be 400 more people complaining, and that tends to degrade the support of the range. And we don't need that. And I think there's still plenty of land around. I think that we have to be very cognizant of the needs of the range and the men and women who train there and work there to keep that a very viable option for the military over the next 100 years or so.
Todd, I think you said that perfectly. Back to, Avon Park being, in my estimation, a world-class asset. And part of the reason it is that you really can't relocate a range like Avon Park anywhere else.
Or create it ever again.
Or create it, correct.
Yeah, once it's gone, it's gone.
Exactly. There's just not room in our country, and particularly Florida, as you indicated. Some of the numbers coming out of the Florida Chamber of Commerce, Florida Commerce, is that there is 1,000 people a day moving to Florida. If you multiply that over a year, that's approximately another Orlando every year.
Right.
And so, mission sustainment is a big concern for the Air Force. Frankly, not just for our mission. The noise complaints and the potential for the training activity to disturb the peace of nearby residents is a concern of ours. But it also goes the other way. It's public safety. Because the range is where we're at, and the reason we have those safety buffer areas, and the reason we limit it to about 20,000 acres of weapons impact area,
which is still huge.
It's still huge, and it goes back to that degree of freedom that we talked about. But that buffers the public from the hazardous activities that we're doing.
Right.
It is just training, but that doesn't mean it's not dangerous. We do employ some high explosive ordnance on range, not all the time, and most of it is just training ordnance. But even a 2,000-pound inert bomb, which is a training bomb, which is just concrete filled, not high explosive filled, that'll leave a mark when it hits. So we want to appropriately buffer even those areas off the range where mishaps could occur and flight paths occur, and ensure that do our best to ensure that we do the training that we need to do responsibly, but also with an eye toward public safety.
And I would think, don't know, but I would think training over land would be different than having a flight area out in the Gulf or over the Atlantic for you guys that are flying missions. And, hey, we've got to be able to fly over land and topography and all that. And so I think that's got to be vitally important to the training that your men and women go through.
Oh, very true. And even just, having a range like Avon Park in Florida is a completely different overland training environment than a range out in the high desert of north of Las Vegas at Nellis Air Force Base. Weapons, aircraft, sensors all behave differently based on the meteorological, if I can say that, based on the weather, based on the climate, and particularly humidity has a huge effect on that. So our armed forces need to be able to train in both places, and particularly to your point over land, where you can really set up the realism. Because as you've had the opportunity to see, and out in our weapons impact areas, we have simulated villages and small towns that simulate kind of the areas of responsibility that our armed forces are going into these days.
What can the state of Florida, what can local government, what can the local people, what do we need to be doing to help ensure the continued relevance of the range, to continue the relevance and the effectiveness of the training for the men and women who are coming in? Let's start with the state. What can the state do? What are they doing to continue to keep this base open?
Well, I'm really pleased to share that from my perspective, Florida is one of the, if not the most military-friendly state in our entire nation. A lot of their programs account for the military installations throughout Florida. There's over 20 major installations, to include Avon Park in Florida, and that makes it one of the most heavily populated, if you will, military states in the nation. And on top of that, Florida does a great job of caring for its military population, if you will. The programs that are available for active duty, reserve, retired, and the spouses is a key piece of that, taking care of the families. Florida does that as well, if not better, again, than any state that I've personally experienced. So that's really important, because when our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, when they are focused on their mission and not having to worry about their family, not having to worry about getting their kids in school, they are better at their craft. They are, they can really focus again on their mission, knowing that their families are taken care of, and so that really helps. Additionally, within the state, at the state level, there's so much support for military installations through the Florida Defense Support Task Force and the Florida Defense Alliance that really help those installation commanders bubble issues up to the state leadership to seek resolutions where we can. And the amount of investment into buffering military installations and the tie to the conservation programs, as we were kind of talking about earlier, from the state level is unprecedented.
Right.
Particularly, latest one is the Florida Wildlife Corridor, 100% bipartisan, over 300 million, I believe, is the number that was put into that in terms of focusing on conservation with a priority when applicable to buffer military installations as well. And so it's that partnership is really kind of my answer with the state. The partnership between the military installations and the state of Florida really makes this a military-friendly location.
I know that the Avon Park range was underneath General Palumbo when he was command of Southern Air Command at Shaw, so he's got a very fond spot in his heart for it, as his brother General Robert Palumbo and General Haddad and all the guys from Two Blue Aces, who you're familiar with those guys, and they'll take it personal and they want to make sure that it continues on. What are the needs out there? Do you have enough housing? Do you have enough? The runways, I think, just got repaved a few years ago. What are the needs? Is there anything that the local people can do to help you all and help the men and women who come and go out there?
Well, certainly, as we mentioned earlier, protecting that freedom of maneuver and buffering the military installation properly, that really happens at the local level more so than the state level. And there's funding and programs that acquire lands, but the land use decisions, as you very well know, are resident and appropriately so at the county level. Those county commissioners have the authority to make those land use decisions right up to our fence line. And so it's really important to work with the community and inform them so that they know about the mission and can make, again, informed decisions about where development goes, both for protecting the installation and protecting the public.
You just mentioned that the local government officials, it is a constant education with them because, they do make the boundary decisions, and they can make or break decisions that severely impact your operations, your approach to target, your whatever you're doing out there. And I think that's you can't go to sleep at the wheel. You've always got to be understanding the needs of the local government, be it Avon Park, be it Frostproof, be it Highlands County, be it Polk County, and keeping those relationships fresh and going.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that calculus, if you part of keeping the local governments informed is to remind them of the economic benefit of having an installation in their area. Even Avon Park, which is somewhat unusual, again, we're a training range, not a base per se, so we don't have the active duty population that a normal base would have, much smaller staff, but we don't have any base housing on the range, so the staff lives in the community. And really, I would say in general, the range is arguably a recession and most recently a pandemic-proof economic driver within the local communities. When COVID kicked off, we shut down for about 2 weeks, like everyone else, trying to figure out, heck, what's going on. But then we started getting units saying, hey, we have to train. And from a range staff perspective, if it's important enough that unit was going to risk traveling during the early stages of COVID, then that we had to be open to host them. And so right off the bat, even early on when everyone was still trying to figure out which way's up with the pandemic, the range was back in action, and again, that economic driver within the community. So trying to share that message with the local jurisdictions, with the local elected officials is important from a range perspective, because it's not just about protecting the military mission. It was really protecting our role as a member of the community.
Well, we're telling our 748 million listeners this. Are we at 748 million yet, Eli?
I believe we just crossed that threshold.
We could be off by a small margin, but is there anything that we haven't talked about the range that you think is important that I'm not smart enough to ask you about, or that I left out?
I would just I'd like to kind of summarize that, and we've hit on most of this, but from a range perspective, we really do want to be a good neighbor. And perhaps a way of thinking about an installation is the kind of the same way you think about either a small city within a jurisdiction, maybe a suburb, or even a large gated community. The same things that impact the community impact the installation, and to a certain degree, vice versa. And so that partnership is really important. And from an Air Force perspective, and in our case, an Avon Park Air Force Range perspective, we really want to be the best neighbor that we can be, acknowledging that we often make a lot of noise and rattle some windows, like I said, and some of the impacts of training that is on the community. It is nonetheless really important for us. And as we look going forward, one of the areas I think where there's going to be a lot of overlap and a lot of common ground with the community is the concept of resilience. And as we experience, just like we experienced last week, right, with Tropical Storm, or eventually Hurricane Debbie, those impacts from the severe storms are critical. And as a community, to include the installation, we need to be more resilient, in my view. But that's, to me, just tremendous opportunity going forward, where we will be able to work together to build more resilient infrastructure, to improve plans for disaster response, things like that. And that is one area that's relatively new focus of the Department of Defense, is to look at the installation resiliency and how that benefits the community.
How many people work out there that are there on a day-to-day basis that'll be underneath Colonel Chang?
Approximately 120 to 130. There's about 45 of those that are government civilians like myself. Currently, we have 4 active duty personnel to include Colonel Chang. So that's right. That's again something that makes Avon Park Range very different than most installations. And then the rest of our contractors that do a lot of our base infrastructure support, our civil engineering, and a lot of our environmental work.
Hey everybody, this is your host Todd Dantzler, and I hope you're enjoying this episode. I would like to take a moment to do a shameless plug for my real estate business. As most of you know, I'm a partner with SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, but I am also a working broker who is very active in listing and selling real estate. I've been in this business for over 41 years. I know, you're thinking he can't be, he's so young looking, but no, it's true. I've been actively listing and selling commercial real estate my entire working career on properties ranging from ag land to multifamily projects to office and commercial and industrial properties. I have held the distinguished CCIM designation since 1991. This is the highest designation you can achieve in the commercial real estate field. I believe that a big part of my success in the real estate business is because of the relationships that I have fostered throughout the state of Florida and also right here in Polk County. So if you have any real estate needs in buying or selling, please give me a call to see if I can help out. My direct line to my desk is 863-877-2846. Again, that's 863-877-2846. So Just kind of wrapping up, I think we've covered a lot about the range, and I think you've given some perspective, and we do need to pay attention to your needs outside the gates as far as land use. We need to understand that you guys are some of the great environmentalists. You don't get credit for that, but the environmental protection that you offer those 14 species and plants and animals, I think is significant and is severely underreported, other than perhaps in the environmental community. And people need to understand that as they may be protesting or whatever. We need to make sure that we are there to support the range and whatever the commander and whatever you as operations person need to do. So we'll move on from that. I want to go into what we kind of call a lightning round. Talk a little bit about what you like. Let people get to know you a little bit better. What's your favorite food?
Hands down, pizza.
Pizza?
Yep.
From where? Where you've been all over the world. Is there a place all over the world that's your favorite, or is it somewhere local that you can get it at home?
There are some definitely excellent local ones. One called Fish Hawk Pizza or Bloomingdale Pizza does a good kind of New York style pizza, which tends to be one of my favorites. So the thinner crust ones. There's what's the chain? Anthony's Coal Fire Pizza.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
It's pretty good, but I tend to like to find some of those mom and pop shops that really make a good pie.
How about your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Oh, that's a tough one.
Or genre? Are you?
Well, we mentioned Top Gun earlier, but that seems like too easy of an answer. I think my kids would say that I like the Disney and the Pixar movies, the cartoon movies these days, because I tend to be a little sappy during those, and they get to me, so I enjoy those as well. But like a good story more than anything.
So they do a movie on your life. Who would you want to play you, and then who would your kids think would play you?
Well, I
could probably get two different answers.
I cheated and saw your question. Thanks for giving me that, because I had no idea how to answer this. My flippant answer was going to be George Clooney, because he's almost as handsome as me. But no, I asked both my wife and my daughter yesterday, because to your point, I thought I'd get different answers. My wife kind of waffled. She liked the George Clooney thing, but and I'm going to blank on his name. What's He was in 300, that Spartan movie.
Gerard Butler.
Gerard Butler is who my daughter said. Yeah.
You should take that as a compliment.
I could not believe.
You should take her out for pizza tonight for calling.
I think I should. Absolutely. Because I was expecting a much more flippant, derogatory answer out of my daughter in good nature. But yeah, when she said that, I'll take that.
At least she didn't say Woody from Toy Story.
Right, exactly.
What kind of music do you like?
All kinds, literally all kinds. I've got, my CD collection has old country, new country, Ozzy Osbourne, really kind of whatever moves me. I think I'm mostly listening to country music these days.
I cannot do that. I'm not a country music guy. But
oh, interesting.
What do you do to relax and chill? I mean, you've been through some pretty stressful situations in your life. How do you deal with that? How do you decompress?
Actually, I like, even though it's Central Florida and I'm still haven't acclimatized, I like getting out and doing yard work. Okay. Getting out there, doing something, particularly with the Air Force. It seems so much of the taskers and the email, you do something one day and you've got to redo it the next day. We get a unit in, we get them bedded down, ready to go, and then they finish up, and then there's the next unit and got to do it all over again. So it's kind of nice to do some work and some activity that stays done, if you will.
Well, I will be happy to tell you where I live, and you can come over, and when you go home, you will be the most relaxed person in the world.
All right, fair.
Buck, I do appreciate you coming. How did you get the call sign Buck?
Actually, Buck goes all the way back to birth.
Okay.
I'm named after my father, Charles MacLaughlin.
Right.
We say, actually, technically I'd be junior because we share the same middle name as well.
Right.
But so they knew I'd have a nickname, and when they were the story is that when they were wheeling my mom and I out of the delivery room, when you go up to a baby and you don't know its name, you're like, hey, Toots, or hey, my dad would always say, hey, little buckwheat. And so literally it was Bucky growing up.
Yep.
And then I met the woman that is now my wife. And when we were first dating, she says, I'm not going to date a Bucky. So it became Buck real quick. And fortunately, I never got caught doing anything dumb enough in the A-10 to earn a new call sign.
Yep.
So it stayed Buck through that. However, when I was flying F-117s, I didn't copy down the route correctly one night. And in the Air Force, when you're in aviation, when you get lost, you have to ask for a vector. And of course, the entire squadron was on frequency. So by the time I got back on course after having been given a vector from air traffic control, there were maps of New Mexico all over my desk. And from that day, at least in the 117 community, I was always known as Vector.
Good. Well, I appreciate you coming in and taking an hour or so of your time to talk about yourself, but more importantly, to tell us a little bit about the range, the importance to it, and the importance of it, and what we as local citizens need to be doing to keep it relevant. And not just those of us that are relevant, local, but the statewide and national as well, because it is so important to the defense of our country. So, but thank you for coming in. Thank you for your friendship. And I want to thank you for your service to our country and all you do for us. I really mean that. And if there's anything you need from us, let us know. And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you very much.
Sounds good, Todd. Although if I could,
Sure.
There's one area that I did want to touch on that I almost got to before, but I think it's worth mentioning. Avon Park Range and the surrounding area, we were designated as a Sentinel Landscape.
Yes.
And that is a program I'd like to highlight a little because I think it's a tremendous opportunity for not just the range, but really for the region. And the Sentinel Landscape Program is based on the understanding that, military installations don't just exist in a vacuum, and they really there's a landscape around them. And the Sentinel Landscape Program grew out of the realization that federal agencies, including the Department of Defense, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of the Interior, had common goals and objectives, often in areas around military installations. And so that conservation value, that working lands, and the military mission is really the three pillars that makes up a Sentinel Landscape. And we were honored to be designated as the fourth Sentinel Landscape in the entire nation, tied for the fourth, but of course we claim being the fourth. And I think that is a program that I think the community still doesn't know as much maybe as we'd like them to know about. And really an opportunity when we're looking at conservation and initiatives like the Florida Wildlife Corridor and how Florida deals with, as we talked about earlier, the 1,000 people coming to Florida every day. The Sentinel Landscape Program is an opportunity for us to work through and to help manage that right here in our own landscape, right here in Polk, Highlands, Okeechobee, and Osceola counties. And it's unique to our area. Again, right now, I think there's only been 18 landscapes designated nationally. So it's an honor and, again, an opportunity. And I really want to make folks aware of that. The Sentinel Landscape, if you Google that and go to the website, there's descriptions of all the landscapes, descriptions of the program, and really, again, an opportunity that I'd like the community to know about.
I did read that during research, and I apologize for not making that a bigger part of this interview today.
No problem.
I appreciate that. Is it something you have to work at and get redesignated every year, or once you get it, do they come and judge you again in 5 years or 10 years, or you got it, you got it?
Once you get it, at least so far. And we were fortunate, again, we were designated early on in the process, again, as the fourth one, but that was before they had a formal application process. And from my perspective, we really got designated because we were already operating like a Sentinel Landscape.
Right.
And to me, that really speaks to the partnerships that develop both with the local community, with conservation agencies, with recreation and environmental groups. Really, that partnership that was already in place and operating really well was what got us the designation. They looked at us and said, hey, yeah, you guys are a Sentinel Landscape. Well before the designation, so it wasn't something we had to work toward. I really think it was, again, the natural partnerships that were already in place.
Great. Well, thank you again. I do want to thank Colonel Buck MacLaughlin for coming in. Again, thank you for your service. We talked about the music you like. I'm not a big country fan, but I do enjoy music. Eli, do we have any money in our budget to start playing music or not?
Not probably.
My gosh, Eli's so tight with the budget. So, folks, what I've been listening to lately is some Stevie Winwood and also some Steely Dan. So until we get together again, plug in a little Stevie Winwood and Steely Dan and enjoy something along with. Who's your favorite country music?
Oh, man, Luke Combs probably recently, but
Luke Combs. I went to his concert last year.
Did you? Nice. He sings that, if you saw the movie Twisters that came out recently, he sings kind of the theme song from that, the Ain't No Love in Oklahoma one. And that's, you might even like that one for country.
Okay.
That one's a little heavier, harder rocking. But I'm not faulting the Steely Dan and Steve Winwood. Yeah, those are classics too. I like that as well.
Well, thank you for everything. We appreciate you coming in. And that'll wrap us up. And we'll see you next time on Todd's podcast.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity, Todd.
Thank you,
I
Colonel.
really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Hey, everybody. I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. If you like today's episode, I hope you'll join us next time. We are going to start a new series called Generally Speaking. We've got access to 6 2-star retired Air Force generals, some fast jet, some heavies, and some helicopter pilots. And we're going to talk to them about leadership. We're going to also talk to them about issues that affect the military today. I know some folks think we're getting a little too heavy on military, but this is a new series. If you like it, let us know, and we'll do more of them. But to have access to these high-level individuals is a treat for us, and to figure out and find out how they think and what they think and their background has been phenomenal, and I think you'll enjoy the series. As always, don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future guests, please call or text our number at 863-288-0944 or visit todddantzler.com. Again, that's 863-288-0944 or visit my website, todddantzler.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.